Lena Pryce had not cried when the bank took the farm. She had not cried at the funeral either, though the two events were separated by only 11 days, and people in Ashford Creek had expected both, or at least one. What she did instead was pack what fit into a single wooden crate, load it onto the back of a borrowed truck, and drive 4 hours north to a man she had never met, because his letter had been the only honest thing in a season of lies. The letter had come through her aunt in Drumheller. Clarence Fenn, 51, operated a cattle operation outside a place called Red Pine Flat, Alberta, near the foothills where the land got serious and the winters got worse. He had written to the agency in Calgary because his foreman had left in September, and he needed someone who understood horses and could keep accounts. And he was, he wrote, willing to consider a different kind of arrangement entirely if the right person was looking for one. He had been widowed 6 years. He did not want sympathy or warmth. He wanted capability. He had a daughter from his marriage, 12 years old. He did not explain more than that, and he did not apologize for the brevity. Lena had read it twice and thrown every other letter away. She was 29 and had been running her father's mixed farm since she was 16, first alongside him, then beside him as he slowed, then instead of him. When the drought took the third consecutive crop and the debt caught up all at once, she had not been surprised. She had seen it coming for 2 years and had not been able to stop it. That was different from failing. She understood the difference, though it didn't make the morning she handed the keys to the bank feel like anything other than an ending. The truck crested a long ridge in early October, and Red Pine Flat appeared in the valley below. It was smaller than she expected. A grain elevator, a co-op, a Legion Hall, a string of houses along a gravel main street. The mountains were close to the west, closer than she'd grown up with, the foothills pushing the land up in long folds before the real peaks took over. She drove through town without stopping and followed the directions Clarence Fenn had sent, handwritten on the back of a feed receipt. The gate was cedar, solid, strung with wire that had been properly tightened. The lane was rutted but graded. She noted both things the way she'd always noted things about a property, reading what they said about the person who kept it. The lane said practical. The gate said someone paid attention to details that didn't show off. She pulled up in front of the house and sat in the truck for a moment. The house was not impressive. Clapboard, 2 stories, painted a color that had once been white and was now the gray of old ash. The barn behind it was larger than the house, which told her where the priorities were. A dog came off the porch, a border collie with a working dog's measured suspicion, and stood at the fence watching her. She got out. The man who appeared in the doorway was not what she had constructed from the letter. She had not consciously built an image, but something must have assembled itself anyway, because looking at Clarence Fenn was briefly disorienting. He was taller than average, lean in the way of men who work outdoors and never quite eat enough in summer. His face was weathered the color of old saddle leather, and his expression was the particular kind of still that meant he was watching her as carefully as she was watching him. He did not come down the porch steps. "Miss Pryce," he said. She walked to the fence gate, unlatched it herself, came through. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Mr. Fenn." He looked at her truck, then back at her. She had 1 crate in the box and a duffel bag wedged against it. "You travel light," he said. "I brought what I needed." He came down 1 step. He had a face that did not arrange itself easily into any readable category. Not friendly, not hostile. Present, she decided. Simply present. "I'll show you the house," he said. She followed him in. The kitchen was large and clean in the functional sense, scrubbed rather than decorated. There were child's drawings pinned to the wall near the window, simple and earnest, horses mostly, and one that was clearly a barn with a yellow sun above it. A door to the right stood partially open, showing a narrow room with a single bed, a dresser, a window facing the barn. "Your room," he said. "There's a bathroom through that door. My daughter, Blythe, is at school. She'll be back at 4. He said the name with a particular quietness, Blythe, that told Lena something without yet telling her what. "The terms were what you wrote," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes. And the accounts. You said the foreman had been keeping them." "What passed for accounts?" he said. "Come out to the barn." She went. The barn was cedar-sided and smelled of hay and horses and the iron cold of coming autumn. There were 8 horses in the stalls, working stock, quarter horses, and 1 older thoroughbred mare that stood apart with the specific dignity of an animal that has outlasted its usefulness and knows it and doesn't care. Lena walked down the row, noting feet, noting weight, noting eyes. The gray one's left front, she said without stopping. He's been favoring it 3 days, Clarence said. It's the shoe. The nail's off angle. I can see it from here. Silence. She came back to where he was standing and looked at him directly. He was looking at the gray horse. I'll need to see the account books tonight, she said. And I'd like to know what Red Pine Flats' relationship is with the co-op, whether you're carrying any credit there. He looked at her then with an expression she couldn't fully categorize. It wasn't surprise. It was more like someone checking a measurement against a mark. After supper, he said. Blythe Fenn came home at 4:10. Lena heard the school bus from inside where she was going through the supply ledger she'd found in the office off the kitchen. She didn't go out, gave the girl a moment, listened to the sound of a child's boots on the porch, the door, the kitchen. A pause. Papa. In the barn, Clarence's voice came from outside, carrying through the window. The footsteps stopped near the office door. Lena looked up. The girl was 12, which she'd known, but 12 looked younger against the scale of this house, the dark hallway. Blythe Fenn had her father's coloring, the same composed watchfulness, but her eyes were a clear gray, and they assessed Lena with the unmediated directness of a child who has not yet learned to smooth that over. You're the woman, she said. I am, Lena said. Lena Pryce. Blythe looked at the ledger on the desk. That's the supply book, she said. I know. I'm going through it. Papa said the numbers didn't make sense. Do they make sense to you? The girl's expression shifted fractionally. She came to the desk and looked at the open page. She pointed to a column. Theo added this wrong, she said. Theo was the foreman. He always carried the wrong number when there was a decimal, I told him. Lena looked at the entry. The girl was right. How long have you been checking his math? She asked. Since last spring, Blythe said. She straightened and pulled her school bag higher on her shoulder. She looked at Lena with that clear gray gaze. Are you staying? That depends on your father. Blythe considered this. Then she went to the kitchen without another word. That night after supper, which was venison stew that Clarence produced without comment or ceremony, they sat at the kitchen table with the account books. Blythe had eaten and done her homework at the far end of the table, with the focused privacy of a child accustomed to adults having conversations she was not part of. When Clarence told her it was time for bed, she went without argument, pausing only at the doorway to look at Lena one more time with those measuring eyes. Good night, Lena said. Good night, Blythe said, and went. Clarence poured more coffee and set the rest of the ledgers on the table. He sat down across from her. In the lamplight, the lines of his face deepened, and he looked less guarded and more simply tired, the tiredness of a man who had been carrying a load for a long time without putting it down. 3 months of debt to the co-op, she said. She pushed the ledger toward him and pointed to the figures. I know, and Theo's math errors compound that. You're carrying more than you think. He looked at the page. He didn't argue. I can fix the books, she said. That part's straightforward. But I need to understand the credit terms with Burdock's. That's the co-op? Harold Burdock. He's had his hand out since spring. Is he patient or is he pressing? He's the kind of patient that turns to pressing when he thinks you won't notice, Clarence said. His voice was flat and dry and entirely without self-pity. She appreciated that. I'll want to talk to him, she said. Clarence looked at her. His hands were on the table, wide, calloused, the knuckles of the right one thicker from an old break. The look he gave her was not the look of a man deciding whether to trust her. Something older and more specific. The look of a man who had stopped expecting things to go well and was revising that expectation for the first time in a while, and was not yet sure how to hold the revision. All right, he said. She pulled the next ledger toward her. The first week folded into itself with the particular efficiency of hard work in a small space. Lena learned the operation from the ground up, which was the only way she knew how to learn anything. She was in the barn before Clarence in the mornings, had the horses watered, and the stalls done before he appeared. He found this and said nothing about it. She noticed that he noticed. The gray gelding's shoe was pulled and reset by noon of the second day. She did it herself because the farrier was booked until the following Thursday, and the horse was already compensating in a way she didn't like. Clarence came out of the tractor shed to find her bent over the hoof and said nothing, watched for a moment, went back inside. At supper he said, "Where did you learn to shoe?" "My father taught me. We couldn't always afford to call someone out." He didn't say anything else. But the next morning there was a box of farrier's tools she hadn't seen before, proper ones, sitting on the bench inside the barn door. She found the error in the Burdock account on the 5th day. It was not a small error. Theo had overpaid a bulk feed invoice in February, a transposition of digits that amounted to $412, and the co-op had not corrected it. Whether Harold Burdock had noticed and said nothing, or had genuinely not caught it, she didn't yet know. Either possibility told her something. She called the co-op on a Friday morning from the office phone. Clarence was out checking Fenceline, and Blythe was at school. She introduced herself to whoever answered and asked to speak to Harold Burdock, and was put through. "Mr. Burdock, my name is Lena Pryce. I'm managing accounts for Clarence Fenn. I'm calling about the February feed invoice." There was a pause on the line with a specific quality to it, not confusion. The pause of a man regrouping. I'd need to look that up. The invoice number is FE024, the payment posted February 19th. The original invoice was for $1,100, and your account shows us carrying $1,512. A longer pause. As I said, I'd need to look that up. "Whenever you're ready," she said. "I have time." She waited. The office was cold in the way of rooms where the heat gets turned down during the day. She listened to the sound of paper moving on the other end of the line and kept her expression neutral, for her own benefit, because no one was watching her, but it was still a habit she valued. "There may have been a processing error," Burdock said finally. $412, she said. "I'll need a credit applied before the end of the month." He gave her the correct platitudes, and she ended the call and sat with it for a moment. Then she opened the general ledger and made a note of the date and the conversation, and what had been said, in the way her father had always kept records, because what was written down was harder to dispute than what was remembered. When Clarence came in for the noon meal, she told him about the call. He sat with it the way he sat with most things, without immediate reaction, giving it space. Then he said, "Burdock has had that money since February. 8 months, she said. He looked at the ledger where she'd noted the conversation. He said, "Thank you." It was a simple phrase, and he said it simply, without amplification, which was exactly how it needed to be said. Blythe came to find her in the barn that 3rd week, on a Saturday, when Clarence had driven to town. The girl stood in the doorway with her coat on and her hands in her pockets, watching Lena work the older thoroughbred mare on a longe line in the center aisle. "She doesn't listen to Papa," Blythe said. "She doesn't listen to most people," Lena said. "She keeps one ear back the whole time. She's deciding." "What is she deciding?" "Whether I'm worth the effort." Blythe came into the barn and stood near the post, out of the way, watching. She was good at being unobtrusive when she chose to be, which in Lena's experience was not common in children her age. She had a quality of self-containment that seemed both natural and slightly sad, as though it had been learned rather than simply arrived at. "She came to live here when I was 2, Blythe said, meaning the mare. "Then she's known you your whole life," Lena said. "Mama named her." Lena kept the mare moving in the circle. She didn't say anything. Blythe watched the horse. "She was sick for a long time," Blythe said. "Mama. Before. I don't remember her sick, but I've seen the photographs from before she was sick and she looks different." Lena brought the mare to a walk. "Different how?" "Like she was still deciding too," Blythe said. Lena looked at the girl. Blythe was watching the mare with those clear gray eyes that held more than they were supposed to at 12, which was not Blythe's fault and not her father's fault either. It was just the way things went sometimes. Some people arrived at the understanding that life was complicated before they had the years to make it easier to hold. "She's deciding now too," Lena said. "Who?" "The mare. She's deciding something different than she was 10 minutes ago. Watch her ear." The thoroughbred's left ear had shifted, subtle, forward now instead of angled back. Blythe watched it. "She's listening," she said. "She's always been listening," Lena said. "She just wasn't sure it was safe." Blythe was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you want to stay here?" Lena brought the mare to a stop and turned her head into the girl's shoulder. "I haven't decided that I'm leaving," she said. "That's not the same as wanting to stay." "It's closer than you'd think," Lena said. The trouble arrived in November, which in retrospect Lena should have expected, because trouble tended to arrive when the weather closed in and the roads got difficult and the options got narrower. It came in the form of a letter from a Calgary lawyer's office, addressed to Clarence Fenn, delivered with the regular mail on a Tuesday morning when frost was already thick on the truck windshield. She didn't open it, it was his mail. But she saw the return address, Harwick and Sorrell, Land and Resource Consultants, and something in the phrasing landed wrong. She left it on the table for him. He read it at noon, standing in the kitchen with his coat still on, and his expression when he set it down was the controlled expression of a man receiving news he had suspected was coming. She waited. "They're saying there's a question." "About the Northwest Quarter," he said. She came to the table and read the letter. It was dense and careful, the kind of language that said a great deal while committing to nothing. There was a reference to a surface rights claim, to a provincial mineral survey conducted the previous spring, to a discrepancy in the original land title versus a newly filed resource map. It requested Clarence's presence at their Calgary office to review documentation, at his earliest convenience. "Earliest convenience," she repeated. He pulled out a chair and sat. He looked at the letter. "The Northwest Quarter is where the water is," he said. "My grandfather deeded it into the family title in 1947. Before that, it was a shared grazing allotment with 2 other families, both gone now." She sat down across from him. "There's a company name in the letterhead. Harwick and Sorrell act as consultants for resource interests. Do you know who they represent?" "A man named Conrad Reeve," he said. "He's had an oil and gas exploration interest in this part of the foothills for 2 years. I've had 1 offer and 1 follow-up, and I said no to both." She looked at the letter again. "This language isn't standard for a surface rights review," she said. "Not a routine one." The 3rd paragraph. She pointed to it. He read it again. What does it mean? She thought about how to say it accurately without saying more than she was certain of. It means someone may have filed a competing claim on the mineral rights underlying your Northwest Quarter, and they've done it through a provincial survey process rather than a direct purchase, which is a way of making it look like an administrative question rather than a land dispute. She looked at him. "When was the survey conducted?" He set the letter down. "Spring. I saw the truck once. Thought it was a road survey for the county. Did anyone notify you a mineral survey was being done on your property?" "No. They should have." He was quiet for a moment. The kitchen was cold, the furnace cycling down. Outside the window, the first real snow of the season had been threatening all morning and was beginning to make good on the threat, fine and purposeful. "You know this kind of thing," he said. "It wasn't quite a question. My father had a cousin who lost a water rights claim in 2009, she said. I helped him go through the paperwork. I know enough to know what I don't know." She looked at the letter. "We need the original title documents," she said. "Your grandfather's deed from 47, the transfer records, every filing since. And we need to know who the provincial surveyor was and whether the survey was authorized through the proper channel." He stood. He went to the door at the back of the kitchen that led to a narrow room she'd assumed was storage. She heard the sound of a file cabinet. He came back with a folder, old, the cardboard soft at the edges, with handling, and set it on the table. She opened it. The 1947 deed was inside, typed on provincial form paper in the style of that era. The signatures at the bottom, done in the heavy black ink of a fountain pen. Everything in order. She looked up. "Is there anything else? From 1947 forward?" "There's a transfer when my father died, 1991, and a water agreement with the county from 1999. "Get those too." He went back and came back with 2 more documents. She laid them out in order on the table. She was still reading when Blythe came home at 4 o'clock. The girl saw the documents spread across the table and the 2 adults sitting over them and said nothing, set her bag by the door, made herself a piece of toast, and sat in the corner with her library book, which was more discretion than most adults managed. At 6, Clarence said, "Blythe, go upstairs." "I'm not bothering anyone," she said. "I know. Go upstairs." Blythe went, with the particular gait of a 12-year-old who is complying but registering her position on the matter. When the stairs were quiet, Lena said, "The survey authorization. The letter references a provincial filing number. Do you have access to the land registry database? Online?" He looked at her. "I don't use the internet much." She pulled out her phone. She found the Alberta Land Registry portal and entered the parcel number from the title document. The survey filing came up in 40 seconds. She looked at the date. She said, "This survey was filed as authorized, but the authorization reference it cites is from the County Land Use Review from March. I'd need to look at the county record to confirm, but that review was for road infrastructure, not mineral extraction." She held the phone so he could see the screen. "They used a legitimate authorization number from a different review," she said. "It may be coincidental, or it may not be." He looked at the screen. He looked at it for a long time. "If it isn't coincidental," he said, "then it's a fraudulent authorization," she said, "and the survey it enabled has no legal standing." He sat back in his chair. He rubbed the back of his neck with one hand, the gesture of a man who is controlling something. She recognized it. Her father had made the same gesture when the news was bad enough that the body needed something to do while the mind worked through it. They waited until I was alone, he said. Reeve put the first offer in the October after Sandra died. He knew I'd be managing the estate and the operation by myself. She looked at him. He was looking at the far wall. He's done the math on that, she said, that you'd be stretched. Clarence looked at her. The kitchen was dim, the window showing only dark and the slow movement of snow. His expression had the quality that comes to people when a thing they suspected is confirmed, which is not relief and not quite anger, but a grim settling. He miscalculated, Clarence said. She wasn't sure whether he meant the presence of the documents or her presence specifically. She didn't ask. In the morning, she called her father's cousin in Lethbridge, the one whose water rights claim she'd helped him navigate in 2009. He was 60 now, and had since worked with a land rights advocacy group in southern Alberta. He listened to what she described without interrupting. The authorization cross-reference, he said. That's the one to pull first. If the county record doesn't match the purpose, you've got misuse of authorization. That alone can invalidate the survey. Can she get the county record? If it's a public proceeding, yes. County land use reviews are registered. The Red Pine Flat area falls under the Foothills Municipal District. There's a public database. She already had the database open on her phone. What about the timing? If they file a formal claim on the mineral rights before we can challenge the survey authorization. There's a 30-day window from the date of provincial survey registration before a resource right claim can be formally ratified, he said. After that, it goes into the extraction queue. When was the survey filed? She looked at the registration date on the land registry portal. October 29th, she said. He was quiet for a moment. You have 19 days, he said. She looked at the date on her phone. The snow was heavier outside now, the foothills to the west entirely gone behind gray. She went to find Clarence. He was in the barn. She told him what she'd learned. He listened with his hands on the top rail of the nearest stall, looking at the gray gelding, who had recovered fully from the shoe and was ignoring them both with the impeccable indifference of a well-fed horse. When she finished, he said, 19 days. We need to file a formal challenge with the Provincial Land Titles Office. I can draft it if you tell me who your original surveyor was. From 1947, there should be a registered mark on the original deed. He went back to the house for the folder. He returned with the 1947 document and pointed to the surveyor's stamp in the lower corner. Clyde Morrow, Land Surveyor, registered number 441. She photographed it with her phone. There's also a registered survey company in Red Deer that can provide a competing survey, he said. I had them out in 2018 to settle a fence line dispute with the neighbor to the north. She looked up. Can you reach them? Monday, he said. Today's Saturday. She looked at the gelding. 19 days with a weekend in it, she said. He looked at her. Something in his expression had shifted from the controlled stillness of the night before to something that was not quite warmer, but more open. The small difference between a man keeping himself contained and a man who has decided containment is not required for this particular thing. I'll call Monday, he said. He paused. What are you going to do tonight? She was already walking back toward the house. I'm going to read the Foothills Municipal District Land Use Database until I find the March County Review, she said. And then I'm going to see whether its stated purpose matches what's on that survey authorization. He followed her to the house. That night at the kitchen table, Blythe came downstairs at 9 o'clock for a glass of water and found both of them still at the table. She looked at the documents, at Lena's phone, at the yellow notepad with Lena's careful handwriting, at her father sitting across with his coffee gone cold. Did you find it? She asked. Lena looked up. The March Review, Blythe said. That's what you're looking for, right? I heard you explaining. She said it without apology, which Lena respected. Not yet. Blythe got her water. She stood in the doorway looking at them. Mrs. Halloran at school has the county planning minutes from this year on the district website, she said. She showed us for a project. Lena looked at her. What project? Local government, Blythe said. She's the social studies teacher. The planning minutes are all public. She said they have to be. Lena looked at her phone, navigated to the Foothills Municipal District site, found the planning meeting minutes. She scrolled to March. She found the entry in 40 seconds. Agenda. Item 7. Infrastructure Road Survey, Township 29, Range 3. The authorization number was right there. She looked at the authorization number on the mineral survey filing. They were the same number. She said, "Blythe, yes, thank you." Blythe looked at her with those gray eyes. "I wasn't eavesdropping the whole time," she said. "Mostly I was reading." "I know," Lena said. Blythe went back upstairs. They drove to Calgary on the Tuesday, before dawn, because the pass could close by afternoon, and Clarence wanted to be back before it did. He drove and didn't talk much for the first hour, which suited her. She had the documents in a folder inside her coat, the originals photographed, and the photographs emailed to her cousin in Lethbridge. She told him about the authorization number on the way, in a flat and careful way that covered the facts without dramatizing them. "Same number," he said. "Used for a different purpose than it was issued for," she said. "The county review was for a road project. The mineral survey authorization cites that number, but the mineral survey has nothing to do with a road." He looked at the highway ahead. The mountains to the west were barely visible in the pre-dawn, just a pressure at the edge of the sky. "That's not an accident," he said. "No," she said. "It's not the kind of error you make by accident." He drove. "Did you sleep?" he said eventually. "A little." He didn't say anything to that, but she saw his jaw shift slightly, the adjustment of a man holding something in. The provincial land titles office was in a building downtown that smelled of recycled air and paper. The clerk at the filing desk was a woman of around 40 with short hair, an expression of professional neutrality that softened slightly when Lena set the folder on the counter and opened it. "I'm here to file a formal challenge to a mineral survey registration," Lena said. "Survey filing number," and she read it from the screen on her phone. "On behalf of the registered title holder, Clarence Fenn, whose title documents are here." The clerk looked at the file number, then at the folder. "Do you have a copy of the original title?" "Yes, and the authorization cross-reference documentation, and a statement from the county of purpose of the March infrastructure review under the same authorization number." That last document had taken her until midnight to draft. She had called the Foothills Municipal District Office at 8 o'clock Monday morning and spoken with a planning clerk, who, after considerable back and forth, had confirmed in writing by email that authorization reference 7C 2024 MRC related to a road infrastructure review and had never been extended to cover mineral survey activity. She printed it from her cousin's email at a FedEx in Drumheller on their way through. The clerk at the land titles office read both documents. She read them again. Then she looked up at Clarence. "You're the title holder?" "Yes," he said. He had dressed carefully. She had noticed this morning the good shirt under his jacket, the jacket she suspected didn't come out often. He stood at the counter the way he stood in his own barn, quietly, without performing anything. The clerk made a copy of everything. She stamped the challenge documentation with the date and the registration number. "A review officer will be in contact within 5 business days," she said. "What happens to the survey ratification in the meantime?" Lena said. "It's suspended," the clerk said. "A formal challenge suspends the ratification clock pending review." Lena felt something release in her chest that she hadn't quite acknowledged was there. "Thank you," she said. Outside on the sidewalk, Calgary moved around them in its Tuesday morning way, completely indifferent to what had just happened inside. Clarence stood on the step and looked at the street. He exhaled once, a long breath, the kind that's been accumulating for a while. He said, "It's filed." She said, "It's filed." He looked at her. The morning light was sharp and cold, and it lit the lines of his face directly, the weathered forehead, the gray beginning at his temples. He looked in this light on this street like a man who had expected a light and found himself briefly without one, and was not quite sure what to do with his hands. "Let's get before the past changes," she said. They went back. The review officer contacted Clarence by phone 4 days later. She was in the barn when he came out to tell her. He stood in the doorway with his coat open against the cold and said, "They found the discrepancy." She set down the brush she'd been using on the thoroughbred mare. "They confirmed the authorization was misused," she said. "The surveyor's registration number on the filing," he said. The officer looked it up. The surveyor is a Conrad Reeves subsidiary out of Lethbridge. The road infrastructure review from March was a county matter and had nothing to do with them. The officer says the survey authorization was fraudulently cross-referenced. He came in from the doorway and stood near the mayor's stall. "They're voiding the survey," he said, "and referring the authorization issue to the Provincial Resource Ministry for review." "That means Reeve," she said. "That means Reeve," he said. He looked at the mare. She had her head over the stall door and was regarding him with the calm, heavy-lidded patience of a horse, who has seen a great deal and finds most human emotion roughly equivalent to a change in the weather. He said, "You knew about the authorization before we left the house. I suspected it. You were certain enough to call the county." "I had to be." He looked at her. Not the assessing look of their first meeting, not the calibrating look of the weeks after. Something that had moved past both of those into a different category, something that was simpler and more difficult at the same time. "Why?" he said. She looked at the mare. "Because it's your land," she said. "And it's right." He was quiet for a moment. "You didn't have to make it your problem," he said. She turned from the mare and looked at him. "You told me honest work and fair ground," she said. "That's what this is." He held her gaze. His expression was not soft. It was never soft. But there was something in it that she hadn't seen before, or that she'd seen in pieces and was only now seeing whole. The look of a man who has stopped expecting things to cost more than they're worth, and is revising that expectation for the second time since she arrived, and is not sure yet what to do with the revision, but is no longer trying to talk himself out of it. She went back to the mare. He stood for another moment, then went back to the house. That evening, Blythe set 3 plates on the table without being asked, which she had not done before. Clarence saw it and said nothing. Lena saw it and said nothing. Blythe sat down and poured herself milk and opened her book. "What happens to the man who did it?" Blythe said without looking up. "They'll review his filing," her father said. "Does he go to jail?" "I don't know yet." Blythe turned a page. She said, "He should." Clarence looked at Lena. Lena looked at her plate. There was the sound of the furnace cycling and the wind finding the north corner of the house the way it always did in November, working at the caulk, looking for a way in. December came and the foothills went white and quiet. Lena settled into the rhythm of a working cattle operation in winter, which was not so different from what she'd grown up with, except that the scale was larger, and the cold had a different quality here, drier, sharper, the kind that got into your lungs before you'd adjusted to it. She and Clarence argued twice before Christmas. The first argument was about the winter supplement schedule for the horses, a genuine disagreement in which they both had defensible positions and which ended, after 2 days, when Clarence looked at the results and said, "You were right about the timing," which cost him something she could see plainly, and she did not comment on the cost, just said, "We can adjust the amounts in January," and they moved on. The second argument was harder. It came from a direction she hadn't anticipated, which was that Clarence went quiet for 4 days in early December in a way that was different from his ordinary quietness. The ordinary quietness was a working quietness, present and occupied. This was something that pulled him back from the surface, and she'd seen it once before and not known what it was, and now she thought she did. On the 4th day, she said, at breakfast, "I need to know when you go somewhere that far inside yourself. Not what it is. Just that you're there and that you're coming back." He looked at her over his coffee cup. She said, "I'm not made of glass. I'm not going to break if you're having a hard time. But I need to know the difference between you being difficult and you being gone." He set his cup down. "Sandra died in December," he said. "The 16th. This time of year it hits different." He said it flatly, not asking for anything, just giving her the fact. She looked at her plate. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have told you before," he said, "so you'd know it wasn't you." "It didn't occur to me it was me," she said, which was mostly true and which he seemed to understand was mostly true. He picked his cup back up. "I come back," he said. "I always come back." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "I can see that." After a moment, he said, "Blythe doesn't know it's the date specifically. She knows I get quiet. She checks on me more." "I noticed," Lena said. "She's 12, he said. "She shouldn't have to check on me." "No," Lena said. "She shouldn't." He sat with that. The kitchen was gray with early morning light, and the snow had stopped overnight, and everything outside was still. She said, "She checks on you because she loves you, and because she knows you carry things alone. She's going to keep doing it until she learns you're not alone anymore." He looked at her. She said it exactly the way it needed to be said, without making it large, without looking away. He said, "You should know that I'm not easy to live with." "I've been living with you for 2 months, she said. "You've been working for me for 2 months. She held his gaze. "It's the same thing right now," she said. He looked at his coffee cup. When he looked up, his expression was careful and direct in the way he was when he was saying something that mattered. "I'd like it not to be the same thing," he said. She was quiet for a moment. I'm not going to do something because I have nowhere else, she said. I need you to understand that. I have somewhere else. I could build somewhere else. I'm here because this is where I want to build. He looked at her. The gray December light was on his face, and outside the foothills were white, and the mountains behind them were white, and everything was very clear in the way it gets after a night of snow when the air has given up everything it was carrying. I know that, he said. And I'm going to keep working, she said. Not just the accounts. The county survey dispute. If the Reeve Review leads anywhere for other landowners in the area, I want to help. There are 2 families to the north who've had the same kind of survey come through their property. He said, I know. I was going to talk to them. We should go together, she said. He said, yes. Outside, the border collie was barking at something at the gate, the particular bark of an animal reporting an event rather than sounding an alarm. A deer, probably, or one of the range cattle who pushed under the fence in winter, looking for the supplemental feed. Blythe came downstairs in her school clothes and looked at the 2 of them at the kitchen table. She looked at her father. She looked at Lena. She said, Is everything all right? It's all right, her father said. Blythe looked at him. Her gray eyes went from him to Lena and back. She was 12 years old, and she had her mother's name on her lips in December and her father's quietness in her blood, and she had been managing both of them since she was old enough to understand what managing meant. She said, Good. She went and made her own breakfast and didn't say anything else and didn't need to. They were married in March, when the first thaw came to the foothills, and the creek on the north side of the property ran open for the first time since November. It was not a large occasion. The justice of the peace came out from Red Pine Flat because Clarence had no interest in a ceremony in town, and Lena had even less. Clarence's older brother drove from Lethbridge and was the only family present on either side. A neighboring family from the property to the east, the Marchons, came because they'd been the closest thing to friends Clarence had in the district, and because their eldest daughter was Blythe's closest friend at school. Blythe wore her good dress and stood very straight throughout the reading of the words, and did not look at either of them in a way that suggested she was trying not to cry, which was also not looking. Afterward, outside in the thin March sun, she stood beside Lena and said, formally, as though she had prepared it, I would like you to still be here in 10 years. Lena looked at her. Plan on it, she said. Blythe made the sound that was not quite a laugh and looked away at the mountains. The provincial review of Conrad Reeve's filing concluded in April. He was found to have fraudulently cross-referenced a public authorization record in order to conduct an unlicensed resource survey on private land. He was fined by the Resource Ministry, and his surveying subsidiary lost its provincial registration. The surveyors, who had conducted the work on the ground, cooperated with the review process in exchange for reduced penalties, and their testimony confirmed that the authorization had been misrepresented to them as well, that they had been told it was a routine extension of the county review. The 2 families to the north, the Marchons and one other, found that similar surveys had been conducted on their properties using the same authorization number. The same process that had cleared Clarence's challenge applied to them as well, and the provincial registrar voided both filings by June. Lena helped them through the paperwork, not officially. She was not a lawyer, and the province did not license her to practice as one, which was a fact she noted with a flat patience and directed into useful work rather than energy spent on the fact itself. She prepared the documentation, explained the process, reviewed the provincial correspondence before the families responded to it. Both challenges succeeded. The South Field, which had been running at half capacity since Theo's mismanagement of the supplemental feeding, was back to full by June. The co-op debt to Burdock was cleared by July. The $400 credit applied in April, and the remaining balance settled by the end of the month. Harold Burdock had been polite about the credit correction in the way of men who realize they have been caught in something, but have decided silence is their best option. Clarence still went quiet sometimes. December was still hard. He still rose before dawn and thought best in the company of horses, and the kind of silence the foothills produced at 4 in the morning when the stars were out and the mountains were invisible against the dark sky, and everything was reduced to the work immediately in front of you. But he came back. He came back because there was a light in the kitchen window, and because Blythe had stopped checking on him quite so much, which meant she trusted someone else was doing it, which meant she was a 12-year-old who could now go back to being 12, which was something neither he nor Lena had said outright, but both of them had noticed. The south slope, the one that got the morning sun earliest and held it longest, was Lena's project by fall of that first year. Not a kitchen garden, something larger. The foothills communities had the same problem as any isolated rural region in Canada. The grocery shipments came twice a week, and by February, the fresh produce was whatever had survived the highway from Calgary, which was not always much. She had grown up in that kind of winter arithmetic, the calculation of what you had and what you could make last, and she could see the south slope producing root vegetables and storage crops that would change that equation for Red Pine Flat if they did it right. She brought it to Clarence in October, with numbers. He looked at the numbers and did not say anything right away, which she had learned meant he was actually considering it and not humoring her. "We'd need another person," he said. "The Marchand girl is 17, she said. "She wants agricultural work experience before she applies to Olds College." He looked at the slope from the kitchen window. The late fall light was long across it, amber in the way that made everything look more settled than it was. "That's more than a kitchen garden," he said. "Yes," she said, "it is." He looked at her. She looked back. Something had settled between them over the course of that year that was not comfortable exactly, or not only that, but was real in a way she valued more than comfort. They were two people who had both been damaged in different ways by the same fundamental thing, the sudden and total collapse of a life they had built, and who had arrived at each other not in spite of that, but because of it, because it had stripped them of the capacity for pretense and left them with the actual thing underneath. She was not easy to live with. She had opinions about most things. She kept records the way other people kept breathing, as a reflex, and she had been known to stay up past midnight with a spreadsheet when he had already gone to bed. And she had a particular expression when she was right about something that she could not entirely suppress, no matter how carefully she tried. He was still difficult in December. He still turned things over in his own hands for longer than seemed necessary. He made decisions by a process that was almost entirely internal, and had learned to share the outcomes without always sharing the process. And she was still learning which of those silences needed a door opened and which needed to be left alone. They were figuring it out. That was the accurate phrase. She preferred accurate phrases. The following spring Blythe turned 13 and asked for a horse of her own. Clarence said it was her decision, meaning Lena's, which was something that had happened gradually and without ceremony and which neither of them had commented on. Lena said, "Yes, if you take responsibility for the farrier work," and Blythe said, "I know how Lena taught me," which was true. The thoroughbred mare died in August, peacefully, in her stall, having decided finally and with complete authority that she was finished. Blythe was the one who found her. She came and got Lena first, not her father. Lena went out with her and stood in the stall for a while and let the girl stand there as long as she needed. "She knew your mother," Lena said. "I know," Blythe said. "She decided you were worth the effort," Lena said. Blythe looked at her. "She decided a long time ago," she said. "You just weren't here yet." Lena looked at the mare. The barn was quiet and smelled of hay and the good, specific silence of an animal at rest. "I'm here now," she said. Blythe leaned against her shoulder. Outside the foothills caught the August evening and held it, and the mountains to the west were clear in a way they were only sometimes clear. The peaks defined and exact against the blue, as though the air had decided for once to be honest about the distance. Lena had not cried when the bank took the farm. She had not cried at her father's funeral. She had packed a crate and driven north, and found, at the end of a graded lane with a tight cedar gate, something she had not let herself name while she was looking for it. Not safety, exactly. Safety was too small. Ground that was worth standing on. Ground she'd helped fight for. Ground that had become, over the course of one hard year and one long winter, hers. She stayed.